The storm howled through the barren, snow-covered plains, shaking the skeletal trees that lined the edge of the wilderness. I could hear it before I saw it, a primal sound, a growl of nature at its most furious. The wind bit through my cloak, sharp as a blade, but it wasn't the cold that made my breath catch. It was the sound, a desperate, raspy whine, low and aching, almost lost in the noise of the storm. I hesitated. For years, I had sworn to never step foot into the wilds again. Not after that night. But something in that sound, something about it twisted my insides. My boots crunched in the snow as I stepped outside the door of my cabin. The rain had turned to sleet, and the wind sent shards of ice into my face. The world was a blur of silver, white, and black. I barely made out the shape in the distance, hunched by the roots of an ancient oak, but I knew instantly what it was. A wolf. Not just any wolf. A pup. His tiny body was curled in the snow, drenched and trembling, a pitiful sight. Blood stained the snow beneath him, dark and cold, but it wasn't the blood that made my heart race. It was his eyes. Even through the storm, those eyes found mine, and they weren't wild, they weren't feral. They were human and full of trust. I dropped to my knees in the snow, my breath catching in my throat. He couldn't be more than a few months old, and he was already drenched in blood, wounds scattered across his body, his little form weak with exhaustion. The air smelled of rain and something else, something wild. Something, wolf. I reached out, my healer's hands trembling, not from the cold but from the terror that lurched inside me. I couldn't help him. I couldn't. But his eyes, those golden eyes, full of pleading and trust. Without thinking, I lifted him into my arms, my heart pounding. The familiar sensation of healing magic stirred within me, a deep, ancient power I had tried to deny for so many years. But I couldn't refuse him. I couldn't let him die, not like this. I whispered a prayer to the wind, begging the gods for mercy. My hands glowed faintly as the magic surged, drawing the poison from his wounds, knitting flesh together, pulling the pain into me. When I was done, I collapsed next to him, my side burning with the weight of his injuries now coursing through me. My vision blurred as the poison fought against me, its icy tendrils spreading, threatening to take me under. "Stay with me," I whispered to the pup, my voice shaking with the effort to stay conscious. But then, just as I thought I might lose the battle, I felt something, the faintest pressure against my chest. His tiny paw rested there, as if he were returning the favor, as if somehow he too was trying to keep me alive. Before I could speak, I heard it, the thundering of heavy footsteps. The ground seemed to shake as the figure emerged from the trees. A man large and broad-shouldered, with eyes like molten gold. He was massive, and the storm didn't seem to touch him. He stood there, watching me, his gaze unblinking. His face was stone, carved with anger. "What have you done to my son?" His voice was deep, growling, and I felt the weight of it hit me like a blow. My heart raced. The pup stirred in my arms, curling closer to me, as if trying to shield me from the man. His father. I didn't answer at first. The words tangled in my throat, too dangerous to speak. But I couldn't leave him like this. I couldn't let him take the pup away. Not after what I'd done. The man, the alpha, took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me what you've done." I started, but the words didn't come. Instead, the pain in my side flared, a searing ache. The soul weaving had taken a toll on me, and it was clear that this was no ordinary wound. The pup's injuries, his silver-tainted blood, had become my own. The poison I had pulled from him now coursed through my veins, tearing at my body. I could see the alpha's hesitation. His anger hadn't abated, but there was a flicker of something else, something deeper in his eyes, like a storm was brewing within him. He knelt down beside me, his hands trembling as he reached for the pup. His voice was barely a whisper as he spoke again, this time more controlled. "Finn," his voice cracked. "Please don't leave me." I watched him, saw the grief in his eyes. This was no ordinary alpha. His heart was torn between the fear for his son and the hatred for the one who had saved him. But I knew, even before he spoke again, that nothing would be the same from here on out. "You will come with me," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. "You'll stay at the pack stronghold, where I can keep an eye on you. I need to know what you did." The words were cold, but I heard the desperation beneath them. And yet, I knew this was only the beginning. "Please," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Let me rest for a moment. Just a moment. I will come with you." The alpha stared at me for a long moment, his golden eyes calculating, torn between his duty and his fear. But at last he nodded, his expression unreadable. 10 minutes. Then we leave. The cold bite of the wind stung my skin as I stood in the doorway of my cottage, my hands still shaking from the magic I had used to save the pup. The storm had calmed slightly, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Every part of me screamed to run, to flee into the wilderness, to disappear into the trees where the pack couldn't find me. But I knew that wouldn't save me. It wouldn't save Finn either. 10 minutes, the Alpha had said, his voice as hard and cold as the wind itself. His words had left no room for argument, but the sense of finality in them sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced down at the small wolf pup nestled in my arms. His fur, a soft mix of silver and gray, was still matted with blood, but his breathing had steadied. His golden eyes, so full of trust, were now closed in peaceful slumber. He was safe for now, but that safety came at a price I was willing to pay, though I couldn't quite fathom the weight of it yet. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I had no idea what awaited me at the pack stronghold, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Werewolves weren't known for their tolerance of humans, especially not humans with powers like mine. If the Alpha figured out what I had done, there was a good chance I'd be burned at the stake, just like my grandmother had been. Still, I packed up my things, my herbs, my needles, the simple tools I used for healing, and hurried out into the storm again. The Alpha was already waiting at the edge of the clearing, his massive form barely visible through the snow. He didn't look back as I approached, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Are you coming?" he asked, his voice rough with something I couldn't quite place. Anger? Grief? I nodded and followed him, keeping my distance. Despite the cold, the air around him seemed charged with an intensity one could almost feel on my skin. He was a leader, and even in the way he carried himself, I could sense the weight of command in his every movement. As we walked, my thoughts kept returning to the pup, Finn, the Alpha's son. The bond one had formed with him when I saved him wasn't just magical. It felt deeper somehow. The pain of his injuries, the fear in his eyes, the trust he had placed in me. It was all still inside me. I could feel it pulsing in my chest, like a thread connecting us. My body was still aching from the soul weaving, and the silver poisoning I had taken on from Finn's wounds was slowly eating at me. I could feel the cold creeping through my veins, and the familiar dizziness from earlier was returning. But I ignored it, focusing on keeping my breath steady and my mind clear. I couldn't afford to show weakness, not with the Alpha so close. We reached the stronghold as the last of the snowflakes fluttered from the sky, leaving the ground eerily quiet in the wake of the storm. The massive stone walls of the fortress rose before us, ancient and imposing. The gate opened with a creak as we approached, and the Alpha led me inside, where the warmth of the fire hit me like a wave. The pack stronghold was nothing like the small village I had lived in. It was a sprawling network of buildings, carved into the mountainside with wooden bridges and stone walkways. The people here were strong, their eyes sharp and watchful, and they weren't particularly fond of humans. I could feel the weight of their gazes on me as we passed, whispers trailing behind us. A woman with silver hair and a sharp expression gave me a look that could have frozen me in place if I weren't already freezing from the cold. Her eyes flicked to the pup in my arms, then back to me with something close to disdain. I felt her gaze like a weight on my shoulders, but kept my head high. I couldn't show weakness. Not now. The Alpha stopped at a large hall, the door wide open to welcome us in. Inside, the heat from the fire pit felt like a blessing against the chill of the night. But the warmth did little to ease the tension in my chest. "This is where you'll stay," he said, motioning to a small room off to the side. "For now." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Before I could make a move, the Alpha turned sharply, his eyes locking with mine. "Don't think for a second that you're safe here just because you saved my son," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll be watching you. The pack will be watching you. One misstep, one sign of betrayal, and I'll be forced to act." I swallowed the lump in my throat, my heart hammering in my chest. "I'm not your enemy," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. I never was. For a long moment, the Alpha's gaze held mine. His golden eyes were unreadable, like they could see right through me. Finally, he nodded, as if coming to some decision I couldn't comprehend. "Stay with Finn. Keep him safe." He said the words like a command, and I knew better than to argue. As he turned and walked toward the other side of the hall, I felt the pull of his presence, like a force field that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't just physical. It was primal, ancient, the weight of a leader who knew how to command, how to protect, and how to destroy. I had no idea what kind of hell I had just walked into. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. I entered the small room, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. Finn was already curled up on the bed, his small form trembling slightly from the cold. His golden eyes fluttered open as I entered, and he reached for me with a soft whine, his voice weak but still filled with the trust one had felt earlier. "You're okay," I whispered, sitting beside him and brushing a strand of wet hair from his forehead. "I'm here." Finn's small hand grabbed mine tightly, his fingers cold and clammy. "I knew you wouldn't leave me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're like Mama." The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know how to answer, so I simply held him close, my mind spinning with everything that had happened in such a short time. And then the door opened. The Alpha stepped inside, his expression unreadable as he watched the two of us. Finn didn't let go of my hand, his grip tightening in his sleep. "You'll stay with him," the Alpha said again, his voice more of an order than a request. "But if I find you've done anything to harm him, anything at all, I will make you regret it." I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with the weight of his words. There was no escaping this, no escaping the bond that had formed between me, Finn, and the Alpha. As I settled into the bed beside Finn, his small body curling against mine for warmth, I realized something terrifying. I had already bound my soul to this little wolf pup, and in doing so, I had bound myself to the pack, to the Alpha. And now there was no way out. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of confusion, exhaustion, and tension. The pack's stronghold was both a sanctuary and a prison. I spent my time mostly with Finn, trying to ease his fear, to calm him whenever the memories of what had happened to him resurfaced. His nightmares were frequent, his little body trembling as he reached for me in the night, whispering in his sleep. But it wasn't just Finn who needed soothing. I couldn't ignore the pull I felt toward the Alpha, though I did my best to keep my distance. Kale, his name was Kale, I had learned that much, didn't make things easy. His presence was a constant force, like a storm waiting to break. Even when he wasn't physically near me, I could feel the weight of his gaze on my every move. It was as if I were walking through a field of glass, knowing that one wrong step would shatter everything. I still couldn't understand what had drawn him to me, what had made him watch me so intently. It wasn't just the fact that I had healed Finn. No, it was something deeper, something primal in the way he looked at me. Something that had only grown stronger since that first night. But it wasn't just him. The pack, too, had begun to regard me with wariness and suspicion. They whispered as they passed, their eyes lingering on me just a little too long. The fear of my magic, of the soul weaving, was still fresh in the air, thick enough to taste. I spent hours tending to Finn, helping him regain his strength. Each day, he seemed to get a little stronger, his body slowly recovering from the trauma. His golden eyes still held that same trust in me, but they also held something else, something that made my chest tighten every time I saw him. He had come to depend on me in a way that went beyond the healing. I had become his anchor, his lifeline in a world that had turned upside down for him. And in a way, I had become something else as well. A part of this pack, whether I wanted to be or not. But the storm that had started the night Finn came into my life wasn't over. It was only building, and I had no idea just how fierce the winds were about to get. The Alpha's visit came late one evening, just as the moon rose high over the stronghold. I was sitting beside Finn, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in days, when the door to our small room creaked open. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The air seemed to shift with his presence. Kale stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light from the hallway. His eyes gleamed like molten gold, fierce and unreadable. His posture was tense, his shoulders rigid, as if he were holding back a storm of his own. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice low and steady, but there was an underlying edge to it that sent a shiver down my spine. I stood slowly, not wanting to wake Finn, but the pup stirred anyway, his eyes fluttering open as he reached out for me. "Stay here," I whispered to him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I'll be back soon." Finn's golden eyes followed me as I moved to the door, his small face full of worry. I gave him a reassuring smile, though my heart wasn't in it. What had Kale come for? What was it this time? Kale stepped aside as I exited the room, the door clicking shut behind me. He didn't speak at first, his eyes scanning me with that same intense, unblinking gaze. I couldn't read him. His face was like stone, every emotion buried deep beneath layers of control. What do you want, Kale? I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands betrayed me, shaking at my sides. I want to know why you're here, he said, his voice cold. Why you saved my son. Why you took on the soul bond with him. You're a healer. You don't make choices like that without reason. And I know you're hiding something from me. I swallowed hard. I couldn't lie to him. Not completely. But I couldn't tell him the truth either. The truth about the soul weaving, about the power that ran in my blood, passed down through generations of women in my family. The magic that was both a gift and a curse. The same magic that had gotten my grandmother killed. The same magic that could get me killed if the wrong people found out about it. I did what I had to do, I said softly, looking down at the ground. Finn was dying. I couldn't let him die. Not after everything he's been through. Kale's jaw tightened, and his fists clenched at his sides. I don't want excuses, he growled, his voice rising with frustration. I want the truth. What kind of magic are you really using? What are you hiding from me? I met his gaze, and for the briefest moment, I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Something raw, something vulnerable. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the hard, implacable mask of the alpha. I'm not hiding anything, I said, my voice firmer now, though my heart was racing. I'm just trying to help Finn. I'm just trying to keep him alive. Kale took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. And you think that makes it okay? You think you can just walk in here, save my son, and then disappear into the shadows? You think the pack will just accept you because you healed him? I'm not looking for your acceptance, I replied, my voice sharp now. I'm not asking for anything from you or your pack. I'm just doing what I do. What I've always done. Helping people. Kale was silent for a long moment, his gaze still locked on mine. There was a fire in those eyes. A fire that was beginning to burn brighter. You're not just a healer, he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. You're something else. Something more. I felt my breath catch. What are you saying? Kale's expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But instead, he shook his head and took a step back. You don't belong here. Not in my pack. Not in my world. I recoiled at his words, the sting of rejection sharp and sudden. But before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to think anymore. I didn't know what to feel. But I knew one thing for sure. Kale had just set the stage for the most dangerous game I had ever played. And I was already losing. The next few days felt like walking through a storm with no shelter in sight. I couldn't escape the constant tension, the weight of Kale's words pressing down on me like a physical force. The pack watched me with suspicion, and Kale's gaze, whenever it landed on me, was sharp and heavy with unspoken questions. The more I tried to keep to myself, to focus on healing Finn and doing my duties, the more I felt the eyes of the pack on me. Every step I took was measured. Every gesture, every word was scrutinized. I couldn't breathe without feeling like I was being judged. But Finn, at least, was getting better. His once frightened eyes now sparkled with life. He smiled more often, and his small hand no longer trembled when it found mine. He was healing in more ways than one, and for that I was grateful. But I knew there was more to this bond between us than just healing him. When I had taken on his pain, his trauma, and his wounds through soul weaving, I hadn't just saved his life. I had bound my soul to his. And the more time passed, the more I realized I wasn't the only one feeling the effects. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the towering walls of the stronghold, I sat beside Finn as he played with a wooden toy on the floor. He had shifted back into his wolf form earlier that day, his small gray body now curled up on the rug as he napped. But even in sleep, I could feel the pull of him, the invisible thread that connected us. It was a strange, unfamiliar sensation, but it was undeniably real. I had no time to analyze the feeling, though. The door to the room opened again with a creak, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Kale. He stepped inside, his broad form filling the doorway. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment I thought he might say something, anything, to break the silence that had hung between us since our last conversation. But instead he said nothing. He just stood there, his arms crossed, his gaze unreadable. I turned away from him, focusing on the fire in the hearth, but I could feel his presence like a force. His tension filled the room, a storm waiting to break. After a long pause, he spoke. His voice was low, as if carefully choosing his words. "Tell me what you did to Finn," he said, his tone quiet but firm. I glanced over at him, my chest tightening. The last time I had tried to explain, his anger had flared, and it had taken everything in me not to break down under the weight of his fury. Now I could see it again, his suspicion, his distrust. The Alpha was a man of control, and it seemed that my very existence was a threat to that control. "I told you already," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I healed him. I saved him from the silver poisoning. That's all I did." His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "That's not what I'm asking. I want to know how. I want to know what kind of magic you used." I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly. "I used soul weaving. It's an ancient magic that has been passed down in my family. It's forbidden, and it's dangerous. But it was the only way to save him." Kale's expression softened for the briefest moment, but it quickly hardened again. He stepped forward, his large frame looming over me, and I couldn't stop the shiver that ran down my spine. "You're telling me you didn't just heal him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You transferred his pain into yourself." I nodded, the truth weighing heavily on my chest. "Yes, that's what soul weaving does. It transfers the injury, the trauma. I took it from him, and it became mine." Kale's face tightened with something I couldn't quite place: anger, concern, fear. His eyes flared with an emotion I couldn't identify, but before I could say anything, he turned abruptly and walked toward the door. "You're not just a healer," he muttered, his back to me. "You're something far more dangerous." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words lodged in my throat, heavy with the weight of what we both knew but refused to say. As the door closed behind him, I felt the oppressive weight of silence fill the room. I was left with only Finn's soft breathing and the crackle of the fire. The connection between us, the bond that had formed when I healed him, was stronger now, clearer. It was like a living thing, a thread that tied our souls together. I wondered if Kale felt it too, but I didn't have time to contemplate it. The storm was about to hit, and I could feel it coming. The following morning, things took a turn for the worse. I had just finished preparing a batch of medicine when the door to my room burst open with a force that rattled the wooden frame. My heart stopped as I looked up to find a group of pack members standing in the doorway, their expressions cold and hard. They were led by the woman with the silver hair, the one who had given me that look of disdain the first time I arrived. "Elder Mara, what is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Mara's gaze never wavered. "The Alpha has made his decision. You're no longer welcome here." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" I asked, taking a step back, but they followed me into the room. "The pack demands an accounting," Mara said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've been hiding something dangerous. The Alpha's son trusts you, but the pack will not." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Kale wouldn't." "I am speaking on his behalf," Mara interrupted, her tone final. "The Alpha will not allow a soul weaver in his midst. Not while he is in charge. Your time here is over." The words felt like a slap to the face, but it wasn't the rejection that stung the most. It was the way they said it. The way they spoke about me like I was a disease they had to remove. I turned toward Finn, who was awake now, his golden eyes wide with confusion and fear. His small hand reached for mine, his grip tight. "Mama," he asked, his voice trembling. "What's happening?" I knelt down beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "It's okay, little one. It's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Kale stepped into the room then, his eyes like fire as he looked between me and the pack. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising in anger. "What's going on?" "They're trying to take me away," I said, my voice breaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." Kale's gaze flicked to the pack and then back to me. "You're not going anywhere." I didn't know whether to feel relief or fear, but one thing was clear. Kale was about to make a choice that would change everything for both of us. Kale's voice thundered through the room, his command rippling out like a storm. "You will leave," he said, his words heavy with authority. "All of you." The pack members flinched, and for a moment, I thought they might defy him. Mara, standing at the forefront, met Kale's golden gaze with a hard stare, her lips curled in a sneer. "You don't get to make this decision alone, Kale," she hissed, her voice thick with disdain. "The pack must come first. We cannot. You will leave, Mara, Kale interrupted, his tone firm and unyielding. I will not repeat myself. Leave, and take your counsel with you. The room fell into a tense silence. I could see the pack members hesitating, some of them clearly uncomfortable with Kale's orders, but none dared to challenge him. They were wolves, and he was their alpha. Even the smallest hint of rebellion was crushed under the weight of his presence. Mara glared at him for a long, silent moment, but at last she turned on her heel, her expression one of barely contained fury. We'll see how long your mercy lasts, Alpha, she spat as she left the room, the rest of the pack members following her with reluctant glances thrown over their shoulders. I stood in the silence that followed, feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. Kale had defended me, but I wasn't sure whether that would protect me in the long run. Kale's gaze lingered on the door where Mara had exited before turning back to me. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable, and something in his stance told me he wasn't finished. What did you think would happen, Lara? Kale's voice was low, but the tension in it was palpable. Do you think I can just ignore the pack? Do you think I can protect you forever? I swallowed hard. I never asked for your protection, I said, though the words felt hollow. You didn't have to, he replied, his gaze narrowing. You're bound to Finn now. That makes you mine to protect. You think I'm doing this out of kindness? You think I've allowed you to stay here because I want to be some kind of hero? His voice was raw with emotion, but he kept it controlled, too controlled. I don't have a choice. I was stunned into silence. His words struck me like a blow, and I felt a sharp pang of something bitter, something deep in my chest. Was that the truth? Had I only been a means to an end for him? Something he was forced to tolerate because of Finn? Or was it something else? I wanted to ask, but I couldn't find my voice. Instead, I turned to Finn, who was still clutching my hand. His small fingers were curled around mine, and his golden eyes flicked back and forth between Kale and me. I don't want you to leave, Finn said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you to stay. I bent down and gently cupped his face in my hands, my heart aching at the innocent trust in his eyes. I'm not going anywhere, little wolf. I promised you I wouldn't leave. Kale's gaze flicked toward Finn, his jaw tight, and for a moment, I could see the conflict flash across his face. His eyes softened for the briefest second before the walls around his emotions rose again. He cleared his throat, his gaze now focused on me. I didn't ask for any of this either, he said. I didn't ask to be an alpha, and I sure as hell didn't ask for a soul bond to a human. But this is the reality now, Lara. This is what we're dealing with. Then why? I began, but Kale held up his hand, cutting me off. Don't. His voice was low but laced with something fierce. Just don't. The raw frustration in his voice made my stomach twist. I could see it now. He was fighting something, some internal war that I couldn't fully understand. But there was something more beneath it, something I couldn't name. And the way he looked at me, the way his gaze lingered on my face, I knew he was just as caught up in this as I was. I didn't choose this bond, he added quietly, almost to himself. But it's here now, and I'll protect you and Finn, even if I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Even if it costs me everything. I froze, the weight of his words sinking in. You'll protect me? I asked, the question slipping from my lips before I could stop it. Why? Why would you protect someone like me? Kale's golden eyes bore into mine, his expression hard to read. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something more, but then he shook his head. Because you're not just anyone, he said softly, his voice hoarse. You're mine, and I protect what's mine. I didn't know how to respond to that. My chest tightened, my pulse racing. The weight of his words felt like a vow, something irrevocable, binding us in a way that felt far beyond just magic or duty. This was something else, something deeper. But before I could gather my thoughts, there was a sharp knock at the door, and the silence shattered. Kale's eyes flicked toward the door before he straightened, his stance hardening. I'll deal with this. You stay with Finn, he said, his voice low but commanding. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the door. I didn't argue. I couldn't. I was too overwhelmed, too shaken by everything that had happened in the last few days. Kale opened the door with a smooth motion, revealing Elder Mara standing in the hallway. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to suffocate anyone nearby. What do you want? Kale's voice was sharp, cold, but it was clear he wasn't happy to see her. Mara's eyes flicked past him to me and Finn. Her lips curled into a small, almost cruel smile. The pack needs answers, Kale. You can't protect a human soul weaver forever. Not without consequences. I felt my heart sink as Mara's words hit me like a blow. She was right. There would be consequences. And I had no idea just how far Kale was willing to go to protect me, or how much I could rely on him. But I had already bound myself to Finn. And now I was bound to Kale too. The door closed behind him, and the sound of their voices faded into the hallway. I was left with Finn, his small body curled up against mine. But as I looked down at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, the calm before the storm. And when the storm hit, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. The days blurred together in a haze of tension. The pack was on edge, as if a storm was brewing just beneath the surface, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke. Kale's decision to protect me, despite Mara's warnings and the murmurs of dissent within the pack, had created cracks that would only grow with time. I spent most of my days tending to Finn. He was still recovering, though each day seemed to bring new strength to his small body. He shifted back to his wolf form more often now, his movements faster, his tail wagging with an eagerness that had been absent when I first found him. The bond between us deepened, and though I was still learning to understand its pull, I felt it every time I looked at him. It wasn't just the physical bond. It was the emotions, their intensity, their weight. When Finn laughed, I felt his joy in my chest. When he hurt, I felt it too. And when Kale came close, it was as if the world around us shifted, the air thick with the unspoken tension between us. The alpha, Kale, had been more distant since the confrontation with Mara. He had retreated into himself, his presence now a force that seemed to loom over me, even when he wasn't physically near. His golden eyes would often linger on me, unreadable, before he would look away, as if battling something inside himself. I had expected the tension to ease once I had proven my loyalty by saving Finn. But the reality was far different. One evening, the pack gathered in the great hall for the evening meal. The air was thick with murmurs, the tension almost suffocating. I sat beside Finn, who was curled up against me, but it wasn't long before I felt the eyes of the pack upon me. Whispers fluttered around the room like the wings of birds. "Who is she really?" one voice murmured. "A healer or something more?" "She's the one who saved Finn," another replied, but there was no admiration in the voice, only suspicion. "Her magic is unnatural. No human should have that kind of power." I felt the sharp sting of their words, the weight of their gaze making my skin crawl. I wanted to shrink away, to hide from their judgment, but I knew it would do no good. The bond between Finn and me, the soul weaving I had performed, was something they would never understand. Not unless they knew the truth. And I could never tell them the truth. Kale's presence in the room seemed to amplify the whispers, his golden eyes scanning the crowd, silencing those who dared to speak too loudly. I could see the conflict in his gaze. He was their alpha, their protector. Yet here he was, torn between loyalty to his pack and the undeniable bond he shared with me. I glanced up at him, meeting his gaze across the room. His eyes softened for a moment, but his expression quickly turned back to one of steely resolve. He wasn't just protecting Finn anymore. He was protecting me. And it wasn't just his pack that was watching us. It was Mara, standing at the far end of the hall, her eyes trained on me with the intensity of a hawk. I could feel the weight of her gaze, the distrust and animosity radiating from her. At that moment, it seemed like the entire pack was waiting for something. Waiting for Kale to make a decision, waiting for the storm to break. But nothing happened. The room remained tense and still, the quiet murmurs of the pack filling the air. Kale didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to silence the room. But Mara wasn't finished. I could feel the storm rising again, and this time, it was Mara who would strike. As the evening wore on, I began to grow more restless. I couldn't sit still, the weight of the pack's judgment pressing on me. Finn had fallen asleep beside me, but even his soft breathing couldn't calm the growing unease in my chest. I stood abruptly, not knowing what I was doing, only knowing that I needed to escape the suffocating tension in the hall. Kale's eyes flicked toward me, but I didn't look at him as I made my way toward the door. I barely made it a few steps before Mara's voice cut through the air, sharp and biting. "You don't belong here, Lara," she said, her voice carrying across the room. The pack went silent at the sound of her words, all eyes turning to me. "You're a soul weaver. A human. You've already bound your soul to my alpha's son. What's next? Are you going to take everything from us, too?" I froze in my tracks, her words sinking into me like a blade. The room was still, the weight of Mara's words pressing down on me. The air felt thick with the tension, the hostility radiating from her and the pack. I knew that Mara's accusations were dangerous, that if I allowed her to continue, if I let her poison the pack's perception of me any further, it would be the end. But I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let them tear us apart. I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I didn't ask for any of this," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of my emotions. "I didn't ask for the bond. I didn't ask to save Finn. But I did it. I did it because I couldn't let him die. I would do it again, and I would do it for any of you if I had the chance. Because I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to survive, just like you." The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of their gazes on me, their judgment heavy in the air. But I stood my ground, not backing down. Mara's lips curled into a sneer, but she said nothing more. Instead, she turned away, her eyes flicking to Cale as she walked toward the door. Cale didn't move. He didn't speak. But I saw the tension in his jaw, the strain in his posture. He was torn between loyalty to his pack and the bond he had with me. I felt the storm break then. It wasn't in the room. It was in me. The night that followed the confrontation in the hall was suffocating. The heavy silence that fell over the pack lingered like a storm cloud, and I could feel the tension in the air long after the hall had emptied. I had made my stand. I had declared myself. No longer just a healer, no longer just someone who was trying to hide from her past. I had chosen to stand with Finn, and whether I wanted to or not, I had also chosen to stand with Cale. I had made myself part of their world, and in doing so, I had invited all of its complications. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a battle I couldn't win, no matter how hard I fought. I sat in the small room Cale had assigned to me, the flickering light from the hearth casting long shadows across the stone walls. Finn was curled up beside me, his small, wolf form taking up most of the bed. The soft rise and fall of his breathing was the only sound in the room. But even Finn's peacefulness couldn't ease the gnawing tension in my chest. Cale had left the hall shortly after Mara's words, disappearing into the shadows of the stronghold without a word. I had felt his eyes on me, his gaze sharp, cutting through the silence. But he hadn't spoken, not after I had called out to him, not after the weight of Mara's accusations had hung between us. He had retreated, just like I had feared he would. I sighed softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Finn's forehead, watching the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. He looked so small, so innocent. I had saved him. I had bound myself to him when I saved his life. But I had also bound myself to his father, the Alpha, in a way I couldn't undo. I didn't know if Cale was capable of love. I didn't know if he was capable of feeling anything other than duty. He had made it clear, in his own way, that he saw me as a necessity, something he was forced to protect, not something he had chosen. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, that there was something inside him, buried beneath the weight of his alpha role, that wanted to reach out, that wanted to protect me, that wanted to protect us. But I didn't know if I could trust that. The sound of the door opening pulled me from my thoughts, and I looked up to find Cale standing in the doorway. His presence filled the room, large and imposing, but there was something different in his stance tonight. Something softer, more vulnerable. "You're awake," I said softly, not knowing what else to say. Cale's golden eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I saw something flicker there. Something that made my heart race. But then it was gone, replaced by the stoic alpha mask he wore so well. "I couldn't sleep," he said simply, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. He shut the door behind him, and the sound of it closing seemed final. He wasn't leaving. "I couldn't either," I replied, though I wasn't sure he cared. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with everything we hadn't said. Cale sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes never leaving mine. His gaze was intense, like he was trying to figure me out, to unravel the mystery that was me. But I didn't think even he could fully understand me, not yet. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked suddenly, his voice rough, as if the question had been brewing inside him for a long time. I blinked, surprised by the question. "What? Afraid of me?" he repeated, his gaze unwavering. "Because of what I am, what I can do, because of the bond. Are you afraid of me, Lara?" I swallowed hard, the weight of his question pressing on me. Was I afraid of him? I had been from the moment I had walked into this world, from the moment I had found Finn bleeding in the storm. But the fear wasn't the same now. It had changed. It had morphed into something else, something complicated, something far beyond just fear. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. No, I finally said, my voice quiet but clear. I'm not afraid of you, Kale. But I'm afraid of what this bond means. What it's going to cost. Kale's expression faltered for a brief moment, and I saw something vulnerable, flicker in his eyes. But then he masked it, as if pushing it down, burying it beneath layers of control. It's already cost me, he said softly. I didn't ask for this. For any of this. But it's here now, and I can't ignore it. Not with you, not with Finn. His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of his confession. He had never spoken like this before. Never let his guard down long enough to show me the man beneath the alpha. And yet, here he was vulnerable, stripped of the control that usually held him together. I know, I whispered, the weight of everything between us pressing down on my chest. I didn't ask for any of this either. But Finn needs me. And so do you. I'm not going anywhere, Kale. Not while you still need me. Not while Finn still needs me. Kale's eyes softened, just slightly, and I felt the storm inside him shift, just a little. The fury, the anger, the control. It was all still there, buried beneath the surface. But for the first time since I had arrived in the stronghold, I saw the man beneath the alpha. I need you, he said, his voice quiet but earnest. Both of you. The words were simple. Simple, yet they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. There was no turning back now. The bond between us, whatever it was, whatever it had become, was irrevocable. But there was still so much we didn't understand. So much I didn't understand. And though I was beginning to accept the pull of the bond, beginning to realize that my life was no longer just my own, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all standing on the edge of something dangerous. Something that would test us all. Before I could say anything else, Kale stood, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't look at me as he made his way to the door, but I felt the weight of his presence, as if he were leaving a part of himself behind. I'll be back tomorrow, he said quietly, his voice distant. There's more to discuss. But for tonight, rest. We'll need all the strength we can get when the pack comes for us. I nodded silently, my heart heavy with the words I had no answers to. As Kale left the room, the door closing softly behind him, I was left with Finn, the bond between us still pulsing quietly in the back of my mind. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but whatever it was, I wasn't backing down. The morning came too soon, the soft gray light creeping through the window as I slowly opened my eyes. Finn was still curled up beside me, his small wolf form peaceful and serene. The bond between us hummed softly, like a thread tying our souls together. It was comforting, despite the weight it carried. I didn't know how long I would be able to hold on to the peace I had found in this room. Outside these walls, the pack was restless, and Kale's decision to protect me, no matter how temporary, was only making things more volatile. The pack was like a wound waiting to burst open, and I was the infection that threatened to tear it apart. I rose slowly, careful not to disturb Finn, and made my way to the small wash basin. The cold water splashed on my face, and I tried to steady my thoughts. The soul weaving, the bond with Finn, the growing tension between me and Kale. It was all too much. But there was no escaping it. Not now. I had to face whatever came next. I heard footsteps outside the door, firm and deliberate. My heart skipped a beat as the door creaked open, and Kale's imposing figure filled the doorway. He didn't enter immediately, standing there for a moment as if hesitating. "Lara," he said, his voice rough, as if the weight of everything was bearing down on him too. "The pack is coming together. Mara is pushing for a formal decision. They want to know what the hell is going on. They want answers." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "What does that mean?" "It means the pack will either accept you as part of us," Kale said, stepping into the room and moving closer, "or they will see you as a threat. And if they choose the latter, it's not going to end well for any of us." I nodded, trying to keep my breathing steady, though my heart was racing. I could feel the pressure building, the uncertainty hanging between us like a sword poised to fall. "Will they accept me?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes softened as he looked at me. For a brief moment, it felt like the storm outside had found its way into the room, the tension between us thickening. "I don't know," he said, his voice low, as if he were admitting something painful. "But I'm not giving up on you." His words hit me like a jolt of electricity, and I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. His gaze was so intense, so full of a pain that mirrored my own. And for the first time, I saw the true weight of the role he had been forced to take on. Cale was the alpha. The pack depended on him. He was bound by duty, by responsibility, and I was just a complication. A complication that he had taken on, whether he wanted to or not. "I'll stand with you," I said, finally finding my voice. "Whatever happens, I'll stand with you and Finn." Cale didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward and gently cupped my face in his hands, his touch warm and solid. His golden eyes locked with mine, and for a brief moment, I saw something more than duty in them, something that made my heart race. He leaned in, his lips brushing against my forehead in a soft, fleeting kiss. "You're not alone," he whispered. I closed my eyes, feeling the truth of his words settle in my chest. But the reality of the situation was far from comforting. We weren't just fighting for Finn's future anymore. We were fighting for the future of the pack, and for my place in it. And the storm that had started the night, I found Finn was about to get much worse. The hall where the pack had gathered was far larger than I had imagined, its stone walls echoing with the murmur of voices. I felt the eyes of the pack on me even before I stepped through the door, and the air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. Cale walked beside me, his presence a constant force that kept the pack in check. His posture was strong, unyielding, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. His gaze flicked to me once, his eyes meeting mine with an unreadable expression. "You'll be fine," he said quietly, as if trying to reassure both of us. "Just remember, you're not alone." I nodded, though my stomach was a tight knot of nerves. This wasn't just a gathering. This was a trial. As we entered the hall, the room fell silent. The pack members were gathered in a wide circle, their eyes fixed on us. It was as if the entire stronghold was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to break. Mara stood at the center of the room, her arms crossed, her eyes hard and cold. She gave me a glance, and the look she gave me was one of pure disdain. "You've brought this human into our midst, Cale," Mara began, her voice carrying through the room like a blade. "A soul weaver, a human with unnatural power. The pack will not accept her. We cannot afford to be weakened by a woman who can steal life with the wave of her hands." There was a murmur of agreement from some of the pack members, but there were others who remained silent, their eyes flicking from Mara to me and back again. I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on me, but I couldn't back down. I wouldn't. "I saved Finn's life," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "I saved him because I couldn't let him die. I didn't choose the bond, but I would do it again if it meant saving him." Mara scoffed. "You think we'll just accept your magic because you saved the Alpha's son? You think you've earned a place here by doing something unnatural?" "I didn't do it for you," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "I did it for Finn, and I did it because it was the right thing to do. If that makes me a threat, then so be it." Cale's golden eyes flashed with something. Pride, perhaps. But it was hard to tell. The room was tense, the pack still waiting for the next move. "Enough," Cale finally said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Lara is part of this pack now, whether you like it or not. She saved my son's life, and I'll be damned if I let anyone treat her like an outsider." There was silence, but it wasn't a peaceful one. The murmurs began again, louder this time, as some of the pack members shifted uncomfortably, their gazes flicking between Cale and me. But it was Mara who spoke next, her voice sharp. "Then you are a fool, Cale. You're making us all weak." Cale's face hardened, his eyes flashing gold as he stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "You will not speak of her that way," he warned, his voice low but deadly. "Anyone who challenges her, challenges me. And I will not tolerate it." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The tension in the room was unbearable. The pack, once full of murmurs and whispers, now seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, their judgment. And then a voice broke the silence. "I accept her." I turned in surprise, my heart skipping a beat. One of the pack members, an older man, battle-worn and gruff, stepped forward. He was large, his face scarred, but there was something resolute in his eyes. "She saved my daughter," he said gruffly, his voice echoing through the hall. "I don't care what she is. She healed my child when no one else could. That's enough for me." There was a long pause. And then, one by one, other voices began to rise in support. The murmurs shifted, this time in favor of me, of the bond that had been formed. Kale's eyes met mine across the room, and for the first time since we'd walked into the hall, I saw something else in his gaze. Something warm. He had made his choice. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally found where I belonged. The mood in the hall shifted dramatically after the first pack member spoke out in support of me. The murmurs and whispers that had once been harsh and judgmental now took on a different tone. One of tentative acceptance, perhaps even curiosity. Kale's gaze never left me as the support slowly grew. His golden eyes held a mix of pride and something deeper, something unspoken that made my heart race every time I caught him looking at me. For the first time since I had arrived, the storm in his eyes seemed to calm, just slightly. Mara, however, was not swayed. She remained still, her expression cold, watching the unfolding support with a thinly veiled contempt. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her lips pressed into a thin line as more of the pack voiced their approval. "You may have saved a few of us," Mara said sharply, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "But this is not about saving lives. It's about the survival of the pack. And you, Lara, are a danger to us all." Kale's eyes flashed gold, his control barely holding as he stepped toward Mara. "That's enough," he growled, his voice low and commanding. "You will not turn this into something it's not. I've made my decision, and you will not undermine it." Mara's eyes widened slightly, her posture faltering just for a moment. But it was enough to show that the Alpha's words still held weight. But she wasn't done. She would never just step aside. "You've been blinded by your bond with her," Mara spat. "I can't believe you're willing to risk everything for a human. What will the pack think when they realize what you're doing? When they see the danger you're welcoming into our midst?" Kale's voice was a steady growl as he stepped closer, his presence looming over Mara. "I said enough, Mara. You've made your objections clear. Now you will stand aside." There was a long moment of silence before Mara's sharp, defiant expression softened ever so slightly. It wasn't much, nothing that would make the pack's opinion of her change. But it was enough to make me realize that, for the first time, Kale was truly standing by me. "I'm not afraid of you, Kale," Mara muttered under her breath, though there was less venom in her voice now. "But I won't forget this. None of us will." "I don't need your approval," Kale shot back, his voice hard final. "And I don't care what the rest of the pack thinks. Lara stays." With those words, it felt like the room finally exhaled. It wasn't a perfect solution. There was still tension in the air, an undercurrent of doubt that hadn't yet been erased, but it was a victory nonetheless. Mara turned sharply and stormed out of the hall, her eyes seething with the kind of quiet fury that promised future battles. The pack murmured, but the room felt less oppressive now, less filled with anger. Kale didn't wait for the whispers to die down. He turned to me, his eyes softer than before. "You're staying. That's all that matters right now." I nodded, my chest tight. The bond between us felt even more intense now, like something that had been irrevocably forged, something I couldn't deny, no matter how complicated it had become. But as Kale's hand brushed mine, a familiar pang of doubt twisted in my gut. Mara had been right about one thing. My presence in the pack had changed everything. I had forced a shift in the dynamics, and that shift wasn't something that would fade quietly into the background. The pack might have accepted me for now, but I knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of unease and tentative progress. Kale and I, though bound by the soul weaving, still tread carefully around each other, both of us trying to navigate a path that neither of us was ready to walk. The bond between us was undeniable, and yet we both kept our distance, unsure of what the next step might mean. But Finn seemed to be healing faster than either of us had expected. He shifted between wolf and human form more frequently now, his small body growing stronger, more vibrant with each passing day. The fear that had once clouded his golden eyes was gradually replaced with something more childlike. Trust, wonder, joy. He spent more and more time with me, his small hand always in mine, his laughter filling the space between us. Despite the tension, despite the uncertainty that hung over us all, there was still something pure and beautiful in the bond one shared with him. It was during one of these moments, as Finn sat on the floor playing with some carved wooden animals, that Kale walked into the room again. His face was serious, but there was a trace of something softer in his eyes, something that made my heart skip a beat. "Finn is doing well," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "He's stronger every day." Kale nodded, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I'm glad to see it. You're doing well, too." The words were simple, but they carried an unexpected weight. It wasn't just a compliment, it was an acknowledgement. Cale was recognizing the bond, the effort I had put into saving his son. The walls he had built between us were starting to crack, little by little. "Do you think the pack will truly accept me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Or will they always see me as an outsider?" Cale's golden eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. He didn't hesitate. "The pack will accept you," he said firmly. "They may not all understand you, but they will learn. You've proven yourself. And as long as I'm Alpha, you're one of us." His words were a promise, one that felt like a solid foundation beneath me. But there was still so much uncertainty ahead. The pack wasn't a single entity, and there would always be those who saw me as a threat, as an unnatural force. Still, Cale's resolve was unwavering, and for the first time since I arrived, I began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, this could be my new home. The days turned into weeks, and the pack slowly began to settle into the idea of me being there. There were still whispers, still moments when I could feel the cold eyes of Mara and a few others following me, judging me. But there was a quiet strength in Cale's protection, a force that seemed to keep most of the pack in check. I continued to tend to Finn, his healing almost complete. His once fragile form had grown stronger, and his laughter filled the halls of the stronghold, a sound that made even the most hardened warriors soften. But even in these moments of peace, I knew something was coming. The rogue wolves who had attacked Finn, the ones who still lurked in the shadows, hadn't forgotten us. And neither had Mara. I could feel the storm in the distance, and I knew it wouldn't be long before it came crashing down. It didn't take long for the storm to break. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of a loud crash, followed by the harsh howls of wolves. The air was thick with tension, and the bond between me and Finn flared to life, as if it sensed danger even before my mind could comprehend it. I bolted upright, heart pounding in my chest. Finn, sleeping soundly beside me just moments ago, was now wide awake, his golden eyes filled with fear. "Mama," he whispered, his small body trembling. "What's happening?" I didn't have the time to soothe him, didn't have the luxury of offering false reassurances. I could feel the danger outside, the unmistakable stench of blood and fear in the air. The rogues were back. "Stay close," I ordered, my voice firm despite the terror rising in my chest. I reached for the small dagger I kept hidden beneath the mattress, a tool I had never hoped to use but always carried out of necessity. My hands shook as I gripped the handle, the weight of my responsibility heavier than ever. Before I could gather my thoughts, the door to our room was thrown open, and Cale stood in the doorway, his face hard, his golden eyes flashing with determination. "They're here," he said, his voice low and commanding. "We're under attack." I nodded, fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins as I gathered Finn into my arms, feeling his small form stiffen against me, instinctively afraid. But he didn't cry out, didn't make a sound. He trusted me, and that trust for a moment calmed the storm inside me. Cale didn't wait for us to speak. He turned, his hand outstretched, as he motioned for me to follow. "Stay close to me. Keep Finn safe. We won't let them take you." The words were sharp and decisive, but his voice carried something else, something primal. I felt the weight of his promise in my chest, a promise that I knew he would keep, no matter the cost. We moved swiftly through the stronghold, the halls filled with the sound of frantic footsteps, the distant clash of metal, and the growls of wolves in battle. The pack was already mobilizing, fighting back the rogue wolves that had breached the outer defenses. We reached the courtyard, and the sight before me was chaotic. The pack was fighting with ferocity, but the rogues were vicious, organized, and far more numerous than I had anticipated. I could see Cale's packmates falling, their bodies torn apart in the fray, their screams echoing into the night. Cale didn't hesitate. He leapt into the fray, his massive wolf form charging at the rogues with a brutal force that left no room for mercy. His eyes flashed gold as he tore into the nearest enemy, his strength and power overwhelming. But I didn't watch him fight. I couldn't. I clutched Finn close to my chest, pressing him into the corner of the courtyard, out of sight of the fighting. I knew I couldn't fight, not with the soul weaving still running through my veins, the silver poisoning still lingering in my blood. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. I reached deep inside, searching for the strength I had felt when I healed Finn, the strength that had allowed me to take his pain and make it my own. But this time, the magic felt different, darker. The air was thick with violence and fear, and I could feel the pressure building inside me, like a dam ready to break. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and allowed the magic to flow through me. It wasn't healing that I was after. No, this time I needed something else. The world around me shifted as I focused on the bond between Finn and me. I could feel him, his heartbeat, his fear, his trust. And through the bond, I could feel Kale, his raw power coursing through the battlefield like a tidal wave, pushing the rogues back. But the rogues were relentless. They kept coming, their numbers overwhelming. I could hear their snarls, their guttural growls, and the sound of their claws scraping against stone. They wouldn't stop until they had what they came for. I had to act. I focused harder, gathering my strength. The soul-weaving magic that had been passed down through generations was still with me, but it had changed since I bound myself to Finn. It had become something more, something that resonated with the pain, the terror, the desperation I felt in my own soul. And then it happened. I felt the magic surge through me, a wave of raw power that crashed into the pack's enemies with a force that made the ground tremble beneath my feet. The rogues closest to me were knocked back, their bodies thrown violently into the walls of the courtyard. I gasped, stumbling back, my vision blurry as the strain of wielding such raw power threatened to overwhelm me. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them take Finn. I couldn't let them destroy what little peace we had left. I felt Kale's presence at my side again, his massive wolf form standing between me and the rogues, protecting me. His golden eyes flashed as he turned his attention back to the battle. The rogues were regrouping, more of them charging at us, but Kale was undeterred. He fought with a ferocity that sent a chill down my spine. The sheer strength he commanded was like nothing I had ever seen before. He was the alpha in every sense of the word, untouchable, powerful, and driven by a need to protect those he loved. But the rogues were relentless, and with each strike, I could feel my energy draining. The magic I had used was a double-edged sword, and it was slowly tearing me apart. I could feel the silver poisoning inside me flaring to life, fighting against my body, making it harder to focus, harder to maintain control. Finn clung to me, his small form trembling in my arms, but he didn't cry out. He trusted me. He trusted Kale. And I wasn't going to let him down. As Kale tore into another rogue, I took a deep breath and pushed the last of my strength into the battle. The pack needed me. Finn needed me. And I wasn't going to run away. I reached deep within myself, calling on every last bit of power I had. And with one final surge of magic, I sent a shockwave through the courtyard. The air crackled with energy, and I watched as the rogue wolves staggered back, their bodies falling to the ground in defeat. The battle was far from over, but we had won the first fight. The rogues had been pushed back. For now, the aftermath of the battle was eerily quiet. The air was thick with the scent of blood, and the ground beneath my feet was slick with the remnants of the fight. My body ached, the strain of using my magic too much too quickly, but I forced myself to stand, to stay upright. Finn was still in my arms, his small body trembling but unbroken. His trust in me was unwavering, and that was the only thing keeping me grounded. Kale stood beside me, his wolf form now fading as he shifted back into his human shape. His powerful frame was covered in blood, some his own, most from the rogues, but there was a fire in his eyes, a fierce determination that didn't waver. He was every inch the alpha. He was everything he needed to be to protect this pack, to protect us. But even he was weary. I could see it in the set of his jaw, in the way his shoulders sagged slightly as he looked over the battlefield. The rogues had been driven back, but they hadn't been vanquished. They were still out there, waiting. And we all knew that this battle was just the beginning. Kale turned to me, his eyes flashing with something like gratitude, but also something darker, something he wasn't yet ready to voice. "You did well," he said quietly, his voice rough from the fight. His gaze softened just for a moment, but the hardness quickly returned as he took in the carnage around us. "But don't do that again." I gave him a small, wry smile, despite the exhaustion threatening to overtake me. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for Finn." Kale's eyes flickered to Finn, who had somehow managed to calm down, his small hands clutching my cloak. "And I'm grateful," he said, his voice quieter now. "But you're not invincible. You can't keep using that magic like that. Not if you want to survive." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I knew he was right. The soul weaving wasn't just healing magic. It was an exchange, a trade of life, of energy, and it was starting to take a toll on my body. The silver poisoning that had been passed to me was still there, still fighting my blood, and I couldn't keep pushing it aside. "I'll be fine," I whispered, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. Cale didn't respond, but his eyes were full of something I couldn't place. "You're not just a healer," he said softly. "You're something more. Something that makes this pack stronger. But we have to figure out how to control it, or it'll destroy you." I nodded silently, my throat tight. He didn't need to say more. I knew exactly what he meant. We were in this together now, for better or worse, and I couldn't afford to fail. The following days were a blur of recovery and preparation. The pack had suffered losses, some serious, some not, but the rogues were still out there, circling like wolves stalking their prey. Cale didn't let the pack linger in their grief. Instead, he kept them moving, organizing patrols, setting up defensive positions. There was no time to mourn. Not yet. Finn's recovery continued to progress at a surprising rate, his energy returning with every passing hour. The bond between us seemed to make the healing process faster, as if we were feeding off each other's strength. He was the one who seemed to bounce back first, a small, determined smile on his face when he caught me watching him. But even as Finn's health improved, I felt my own begin to waver. The magic I had used was taking a toll on me, a price I couldn't escape. The silver poisoning had been quiet for a time, but now it roared inside me, a constant, nagging burn that flared up when I least expected it. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the strain on my mind, on my spirit. The bond between Finn and me was stronger than ever, but I was beginning to realize just how much of myself I had given away to save him. I had bound my soul to his, and to Cale's in a way I couldn't fully understand. And with that bond came the weight of their pain, their burdens. The fear, the responsibility, the uncertainty. It wasn't just the rogues that were threatening to destroy us. It was the emotional toll of everything we had endured together. I found myself alone in my room one evening, staring at the flickering fire in the hearth. Finn had fallen asleep beside me, his soft breathing a comfort, but my mind was restless. I couldn't stop thinking about the future, about the storm that was sure to come. I felt Cale's presence before I saw him. His footsteps were soft against the stone floor, but the air around him crackled with authority, with power. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, his golden eyes focused on me. He said nothing for a moment, simply observing, before he finally stepped inside. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said quietly, his voice thick with concern. I didn't respond immediately, unsure of how to voice the thoughts swirling in my head. Instead, I reached for the small vial of herbs I had been given to ease the pain of the silver poisoning. But Cale was faster. He reached out, gently taking the vial from my hands before I could even open it. "Stop," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I don't care what you think. You can't keep doing this alone." I felt a wave of frustration rise in me, but I tamped it down. Cale didn't understand. He couldn't. He was the Alpha. His power was endless. But I was human, mortal, and the strain I was under was slowly eroding me. "I'm not alone," I whispered, meeting his gaze. "I have Finn. I have you." Cale's eyes softened, just slightly, and for the first time in a long while, he stepped closer to me. His hand brushed mine. Just a brief touch, but it felt like an anchor in the storm that raged inside me. "You're not alone," he repeated softly, his voice filled with a kind of tenderness I hadn't heard before. "But you're still human, and you have limits." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. What if I can't keep up with you? What if I fail? Cale's gaze locked onto mine, his expression hardening into something resolute, something unshakable. "You won't fail. Not while I'm here." There was a brief silence before he continued, his voice quieter now. "I can't protect you from everything, Lara, but I'll fight with everything I have. I'll protect you and Finn. Always." His words were a promise, but they were also a weight, one that I wasn't sure I could bear. But in that moment, with him standing beside me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. Whatever came next, I knew we would face it together. The days that followed were a quiet reprieve. Too quiet, I thought. The pack fortified their borders, and while the rogues had retreated for now, we all knew it was only a matter of time before they would return. Their leader, whom I had heard whispered about only in rumors, was still out there. The one who had orchestrated the attack on Finn. The one who seemed to want something far more than just power. I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just after the pack. They were after me. The bond between Finn, Cale, and me had only deepened over the days. Finn's strength had returned, and with each passing moment, I could feel the steady thrum of the connection between us. It was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone, that we were bound together by something far stronger than just magic. Kale, however, was a mystery in and of himself. His moments of tenderness were few, but they were enough to make me wonder if there was more to this bond than he was willing to admit. I wasn't foolish enough to think that he felt the same way I did. Not yet. But I had seen the way his gaze softened when he looked at me, when he saw me with Finn. I had seen how he was always ready to fight for us, even if his heart was still buried beneath layers of duty. And yet, despite the peace we were trying to hold on to, there was an undercurrent of something darker, something I couldn't ignore. That night, after a long day of training and fortifying the stronghold, I found myself sitting alone in the courtyard. The fire had long since died down, and the cold air had started to seep into my bones. My mind was still swirling with everything that had happened. The battle with the rogues, the bond one had with Finn, the emotions that Kale and I seemed to avoid talking about. I couldn't keep running from it all. I stood, drawing my cloak around my shoulders, when the sound of footsteps echoed through the courtyard. I turned, instinctively bracing myself for whatever came next. It was Kale. His silhouette was tall and imposing against the night sky, the moonlight glinting off the silver streaks in his dark hair. He was moving toward me slowly, his posture relaxed, but there was something about him that made the air feel charged. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice rough from the cold. "It's not safe." I gave him a wry smile. "I'm not afraid of the dark." Kale's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. "The rogues are still out there, and we don't know what their leader has planned next." I nodded, my thoughts racing. "I know. But it's more than just them, isn't it?" He didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, his golden eyes catching the light of the faint stars above us. "What do you mean?" I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "You've been keeping something from me. The rogues didn't just come for Finn. They came for me. And I don't think it's just about the soul weaving. They're after something more." Kale's expression shifted, his jaw tightening slightly, his gaze distant. I could see the weight of his responsibility, the knowledge that everything was shifting around him. "They're after the soul bond," he said, his voice low and measured. "The one you share with Finn. They don't understand it, and they won't rest until they do." I felt a chill settle over me, the weight of his words sinking into my bones. "What do you mean, they don't understand it?" Kale stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "The bond you share with Finn isn't just any bond. It's unique. It's the kind of bond that could change everything. And they want to control it or destroy it." My heart raced, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. The rogue leader. He had been after something far bigger than just control of the pack. He wanted the power that Finn and I had unknowingly forged between us. I swallowed, struggling to process the gravity of it all. What happens if they get what they want? Kale stepped even closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "If they control it, they'll have the power to manipulate the packs, to control everything. The soul weaving, the bond. It's something that shouldn't exist. It's too dangerous for them to ignore." I took a step back, the air around me growing heavier with the weight of his words. "So we're the target. Not just Finn, but me too." Kale's eyes locked onto mine, his expression more serious than I had ever seen. "Yes. You've tied yourself to him in a way that no one can understand. You've become part of something far bigger than either of us could have anticipated." I felt my chest tighten, a cold realization sweeping over me. The bond that had started as a desperate act of healing, a way to save Finn's life, had become something much more complex. It had tied me to Kale, to his pack, to everything he represented. And now it had made us all a target. "Then we can't let them get to us," I said firmly, pushing past the fear that had been building in my chest. "We have to end this before they have a chance." Kale nodded, his golden eyes fierce. "We will. But it's not just about fighting them. It's about understanding what they're after and how to protect you." I didn't respond, but the storm inside me was starting to settle. Kale's words were a warning, but they were also a promise. He would fight for us just as I would. The pack might still be divided, but we would stand together against whatever came next. The next few days were spent preparing for the worst. Kale sent out scouts to track the rogues, to learn their movements, while the rest of us fortified the stronghold. Tension hung thick in the air, and I could feel the weight of the pack's fear in every glance they cast toward me. I wasn't just the healer anymore. I was a weapon, and the power that had been thrust into my hands wasn't something I could easily control. Kale and I spoke little, both of us lost in our thoughts as the hours ticked by, but I could feel the pull between us, stronger than before. It was as if the bond between us had grown, twisted itself into something new, something more powerful, with every moment that passed. And yet, despite all the tension, despite the constant threat of the rogues, there was something else simmering beneath the surface. Something I couldn't ignore any longer. A question I couldn't quite bring myself to ask. But it was always there, like a shadow in the back of my mind. What would happen if the storm didn't end? The nights were the hardest. When the sun set, when the last rays of daylight disappeared behind the mountains, the fear would creep in. It wasn't just the tension from the rogues lingering on the edge of the stronghold. It was the anxiety of what was yet to come, of what was changing between Kale, Finn, and me. The bond was growing, evolving, and neither of us seemed able to stop it. It was clear now that I wasn't just here as a healer anymore. I wasn't just a soul weaver who had saved Finn's life. I had become something else entirely, a part of this pack, whether I wanted it or not. And with that came responsibility. Kale had kept his promise. He had defended me, protected me, even when Mara and others in the pack had doubted my place here. But the deeper we delved into the rogue's plans, the more I realized that his protection came with a price. I wasn't just fighting for Finn anymore. I was fighting for this entire pack, and by extension for Kale. The night the storm finally broke, I was alone in the courtyard once again, staring up at the stars. The cold wind bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. It cleared my thoughts, made me feel grounded, even if just for a moment. The crackling of branches broke my solitude, and I turned just in time to see Kale approaching, his figure silhouetted by the torchlight that flickered in the distance. His stride was purposeful, like he had somewhere to be. But he stopped when he reached me, his golden eyes fixed on mine. "You're out here again," Kale said quietly, his voice softer than I'd heard it in days. I shrugged, trying to push aside the growing tension that had settled deep within me. I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. Kale gave me a look that felt like an attempt to read between the lines, but he said nothing. Instead, he crossed the space between us, his presence overwhelming as he reached me. I could feel the bond flare alive between us, as if it responded to his proximity. The warmth of his touch, even from a distance, made me ache. "Era," he began, his voice low. "I need to talk to you." I tilted my head slightly, confusion flickering across my face. "About what?" He hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. "About us. About what's happening." My heart skipped a beat. I knew this conversation was inevitable. The unspoken tension that had been hanging in the air for days now had finally reached its breaking point. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "What do you mean?" "Kale, what is happening between us?" Kale took a step closer, the distance between us shrinking, but his eyes remained filled with something unreadable. His gaze dropped briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes. "This bond, it's not just magic. It's not just some curse that we've been cursed with." His words were thick, like he was trying to push them past the wall he had built around himself. "I know," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "But I don't understand it. I don't know what it means." He stepped forward, closing the distance until we were standing just inches apart. My breath caught in my throat, my heart hammering, and I could feel the electricity between us, a pulse that only seemed to grow stronger. "I think I'm starting to," Kale said quietly, his voice low but intense. "I think I've always known, but I've been afraid to admit it." I looked up at him, my breath catching as his golden eyes locked with mine. There was a flicker of something that made my pulse quicken, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "What are you afraid of?" I asked, my voice soft, unsure if I was ready for the answer. He inhaled sharply, his eyes flickering with a mix of emotions. "Afraid of losing control. Of losing you. Of this bond changing everything, turning everything I thought I knew upside down." His words hit me like a shockwave. His fear mirrored my own, a fear I had been too afraid to voice. "I don't want to lose you either," I said before I could stop myself. "But I don't know how to handle this, us." Kale's expression softened, his hand moving as if he wanted to reach for me, but he stopped himself, as if fighting against something inside him. "I don't either," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. I won't let anyone take what's ours." I took a step closer to him, needing to close the space between us, needing to feel the warmth of him against me. "Kale," I'm not just a healer anymore. I'm not just a soul weaver. I'm part of this pack. And I need to know that I'm not doing this alone. His eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as though he was about to say something else. Something more than just words. But instead, he nodded, his hand finally reaching out to touch mine. "You're not alone," he said softly, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. "You never were." The weight of his words settled between us, and the world outside seemed to fade away. The fighting, the dangers that loomed over us. None of it mattered as much as what was happening between us. But before either of us could say anything more, a shout echoed from the direction of the gates. It was one of the guards, his voice urgent and panicked. "Kale, Mara's forces are at the gate. The rogues are attacking." The calm that had settled over us shattered like glass. Without a word, Kale's grip tightened on my hand, pulling me with him as we ran toward the gates. His eyes were fierce, his steps purposeful. We were back in battle mode. The calm of the courtyard, the fleeting moment of peace between us, was gone. The war was still here. As we reached the outer walls, I could see the shadows moving in the distance. The rogue wolves were advancing quickly, far more organized than the last time. They weren't just here to fight, they were here to win. I felt my heart race. The bond between Finn and me hummed, and I knew he would be safe inside. But I also knew that our fight wasn't over. The stakes had been raised, and the rogue leader was coming for me. For us. The courtyard exploded into chaos the moment we reached the gates. The guards were scrambling to reinforce the walls, their weapons drawn, their faces tense with the same fear I could feel creeping into my bones. Kale's command was immediate, his alpha presence undeniable as he barked orders to the warriors around us. "Hold the line. Protect the entrances. No one gets through." His voice rang out, cutting through the chaos, demanding obedience. I stood beside him, my heart racing as the sound of howling wolves echoed through the night. It wasn't just a call to arms. It was a war cry. The rogues were here, and they were hungry for blood. Kale's golden eyes locked onto mine, a flicker of hesitation crossing his features before he masked it with steely determination. "Stay inside," he commanded. "I don't want you out here. Not with them." I opened my mouth to protest, but he didn't wait for me to argue. "You'll be safer inside the walls. Trust me." Trust. It was a word that had taken on new meaning over the past weeks. But with the bond between us pulling at me, with the overwhelming sense of duty that Kale had for his pack, and for me, I knew he was right. I couldn't risk putting myself in danger, not when my presence was tied to so much more than just me. I nodded, though it felt like I was abandoning something deep inside of me, something primal, something that needed to fight, needed to protect. But Kale was right. I was no fighter, not in the way the pack needed. I had my own role to play. "I'll stay with Finn," I said softly, the words feeling like a promise I wasn't ready to break. "He's still too young to fight." Kale's eyes softened briefly, and he gave a small nod. "Keep him safe. I'll handle the rest." He turned, and before I could say another word, he was running toward the front lines, his massive frame cutting through the chaos, a force to be reckoned with. I watched him go, a lump forming in my throat. But I didn't have time to dwell. The sounds of the battle grew louder, and my thoughts snapped back to reality. I had to protect Finn. I had to stay focused. I moved quickly, heading toward the small safe room where Finn had been sleeping. The door was locked, but I hadn't forgotten the key hidden in my cloak. It was a simple precaution, but in times like these, every step counted. When I opened the door, I found Finn sitting on the bed, his small hands gripping the edges of the blanket. His golden eyes were wide with fear, but there was no crying, no panicked shouts. He was trying to be brave. "Stay here," I said, kneeling in front of him, my voice gentle but firm. "I'm going to make sure everything is okay. But you need to stay hidden. Stay out of the way. Do you understand?" Finn nodded, but there was a stubbornness in his gaze that made me pause. He wasn't a child who easily accepted being told what to do, not after everything he'd been through. "I'm not scared," he said, his voice small but steady. "I want to help." I felt my heart ache for him. This was no place for a child, especially not one who had already been through so much. But Finn wasn't just any child. He was different, and I had seen the strength in him that most would never understand. "I know you're not scared, little wolf," I whispered, brushing a strand of his silver-gray hair from his face. "But you need to stay safe for me. For Kale." I saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes. For you, he repeated quietly, before curling up on the bed, clutching the blanket tighter around him. I didn't wait another moment. As I closed the door behind me, I heard the sounds of battle drawing closer. The rogue wolves were relentless. I needed to do whatever I could to keep the pack safe, and keep Finn out of harm's way. Outside, the battle had escalated. The rogues had breached the outer walls, and the pack was holding their ground as best they could. But it wasn't enough. The enemy was larger, more aggressive, and they knew what they wanted. They knew that in order to break Cale's leadership, they needed to tear down everything he stood for. And that meant breaking me. I couldn't let that happen. I found myself standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching the battle unfold. The pack fought valiantly, their movements quick and coordinated, but I could see the numbers weren't on our side. There were too many of them. The wind whipped around me, and I could feel the pulse of the bond with Cale, feel his fury and desperation as he fought to protect his pack. He was in the thick of the battle, taking on several rogues at once, his strength unmatched. But even Cale was starting to wear down. I couldn't stand back any longer. I reached deep inside, feeling the magic that flowed through my veins. The power I had felt when I first healed Finn, when I bound myself to him. I could feel it stirring again, though this time it was far more volatile, far more dangerous. The soul weaving wasn't just a tool for healing. It was a weapon, one that could destroy or save. And I wasn't going to let it destroy us. The moment I allowed the magic to flow through me, the air around me seemed to vibrate. The bond between Finn, Cale, and me pulsed stronger than ever, a force that made the ground beneath me tremble. I could feel the rogues closing in, their hunger for destruction clouding their minds, their movements chaotic and unpredictable. I focused, reaching out with every fiber of my being, pulling the magic toward the battle. The air crackled with energy, and with a sharp motion, I released it. A wave of power surged through the courtyard, knocking the rogue wolves back, sending them sprawling into the dirt. The force of it was enough to create a temporary break in the battle, a momentary lull that gave the pack a chance to regroup. I gasped, the effort leaving me breathless. My vision blurred from the strain, and I could feel the silver poisoning fighting against me once again, making the magic harder to control. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not with Cale out there. I pushed forward, gathering my strength. And when I turned back toward the gates, I saw the rogue leader at the front, his eyes glowing with malice. His face was twisted into a snarl, his power unmistakable. He was the one who had orchestrated all of this. And now he was coming for me. The rogue leader stepped forward, his presence commanding, as if the very ground beneath him trembled in fear of his arrival. His eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light, the same hue as Cale's, but far more malevolent. There was a power to him that I couldn't ignore, a dark force that seemed to draw the very air away from me. I could feel the bond between me and Cale pulsing, a steady thrum that resonated in the deepest parts of my soul. But as I stood there, facing the rogue leader, that connection felt distant, almost as if it were being pulled away by an unseen force. The weight of the silver poisoning in my blood flared again, threatening to overwhelm me, but I fought against it. The rogue leader stopped just at the edge of the courtyard, his gaze never leaving mine. The battle raged around us, but it felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. His smile was predatory, twisted, like a wolf savoring its prey before the kill. "You are the soul weaver," he said, his voice low and mocking, sending a shiver down my spine. "The one who dared to tie herself to the Alpha's son. To him," he added, glancing over his shoulder at the chaos unfolding at the walls. His eyes returned to me, his smile growing wider. "You've made yourself a valuable prize." His words cut through me, sharp and cold. I wanted to deny it, to stand tall and tell him I wasn't afraid, but the truth was undeniable. The power he wielded was unlike anything I had felt before. He was dangerous, and he knew it. I took a deep breath, forcing the fear to recede, focusing on the bond one shared with Cale. His strength, his determination, was still there, even though I could feel the strain in his every movement as he fought against the growing numbers of rogues. "You don't know what you're dealing with," I said, my voice more steady than I felt. "You think you can control this bond, but you're wrong. You can't." The rogue leader's eyes narrowed, his smile never faltering. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The bond between you and the Alpha's son. Do you think it's just magic? No, it's something far more dangerous. It's a weapon, and I will use it to destroy everything." The weight of his words settled over me like a storm cloud, suffocating and cold. I knew he wasn't wrong. The bond between Finn and me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It had power, raw and untapped, and the longer it lasted, the more I feared what it might be capable of. But I wasn't going to let him have it. I wasn't going to let him take everything from us. "You won't get that chance," I said, my voice rising, determination flooding my veins. "This bond is mine. It's ours." With that, I reached out, feeling the pull of the magic again, deeper this time. I called on the power within me, feeling the soul-weaving surge through my body like a wildfire, pushing against the silver poisoning that sought to tear me apart. The ground beneath me shook as the magic responded, a storm of energy swirling around us, both overwhelming and beautiful. The rogue leader took a step forward, his eyes flashing with fury. "You think you can stop me? You're just a human, weak and fragile. You can't wield that kind of power." I didn't listen. I couldn't. I focused everything on the bond, on the connection that had tied me to Finn, on the strength of my love and my determination to protect him. The magic roared to life. The wave of power that surged through the courtyard was unlike anything I had ever felt before. The rogue leader staggered back, his hands flying up as if to block the force that slammed into him. But it wasn't enough. He was pushed back, his feet sliding in the dirt as the raw magic I unleashed struck him like a thunderbolt. I gasped for air as the power drained from me, the strain almost too much to bear. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. I couldn't let him get close to Finn. I couldn't let him destroy everything I had worked so hard to protect. The rogue leader regained his footing, his eyes burning with fury as he wiped the blood from his mouth, a twisted grin spreading across his face. "Impressive," he sneered, "but you're only delaying the inevitable." Before I could react, the rogue leader surged forward, faster than I could comprehend. His claws extended, his aim set directly for me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the strike. But it never came. A loud, guttural roar filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of bodies colliding. My eyes snapped open to see Kale, in his massive wolf form, charging at the rogue leader with a ferocity I had never seen before. His golden eyes blazed with rage as he collided with the rogue, his jaws locking around the enemy's throat in one swift motion. For a moment, the entire courtyard seemed to stop, the sounds of battle fading as all eyes turned to the Alpha. Kale was no longer just the leader of the pack. He was the embodiment of its strength, of its will to survive. With a final, crushing bite, Kale tore the rogue leader's throat open, the rogue's body collapsing to the ground with a sickening thud. The pack watched in stunned silence, as if the very earth itself had trembled at the sight of Kale's victory. Kale stood over the rogue's body, his chest heaving, his golden eyes glowing with power. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting mine across the courtyard, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that made my heart skip a beat. It was relief. But the moment didn't last. The battle was far from over. The remaining rogues were still charging, still pushing forward, their desperation palpable. The pack was holding its own, but we had lost so much already. We couldn't afford to lose more. Kale turned toward me, his voice booming over the battlefield. "Get Finn. Now!" The urgency in Kale's voice jolted me into action. I turned on my heel and ran, pushing through the chaos, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear Kale's roar as he joined the pack, his presence felt in every step. But all I could think about was Finn, his safety, his future. I reached the small room where I had left him, my breath ragged. But as I opened the door, my heart sank. Finn wasn't there. I called out his name, my voice shaking. "Finn!" There was no answer. And that was when I heard the sound. A howl. Low, guttural, and unmistakable. A rogue had reached the heart of the stronghold. The howl echoed in the hall like a death knell, chilling my blood. It wasn't just the sound of the battle. It was the sound of something more. Something had broken through. Something had reached the heart of the stronghold. "Finn!" I called out again, my voice hoarse with panic. I searched the small room, moving frantically, my heart in my throat. My mind raced, but my body wouldn't move fast enough. The rogue's howl came again, closer this time. It was followed by the sounds of footsteps, heavy, deliberate. My body went cold with dread. The bond with Finn pulsed wildly in my chest, pulling at me with each passing second. "Finn!" I shouted again, turning toward the door. I couldn't stay here, couldn't wait. He was in danger, and I knew I couldn't just stand by and let that happen. I pushed open the door and ran into the hallway, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my ears. The stronghold was in chaos. Wolves and rogues were fighting in every corner, bodies crashing into walls, weapons clashing. The sound of fighting was deafening, but there, amidst the chaos, I heard a whimper, a small, desperate sound that broke through everything else. I spun toward the source. Finn. I saw him, small and terrified, his silver gray fur matted with blood. He was cornered, backed into the farthest corner of the hall by one of the rogue wolves. Its eyes gleamed with hunger, its fangs bared, its massive form looming over Finn. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I didn't think. I just acted. The magic surged within me, more powerful now, more desperate. And I reached for it, willing the energy to respond. The bond between Finn and me flared to life, raw and unyielding, like a tether connecting us despite the danger between us. The rogue lunged at Finn with a snarl, but before it could make contact, I was there. A blast of power erupted from me, an invisible force that knocked the rogue back, sending it sprawling across the stone floor. The rogue howled in pain but quickly regained its footing, glaring at me with murderous intent. I didn't hesitate. I had no choice. I focused every ounce of my energy on the rogue, pushing the magic to its breaking point. The power I wielded wasn't just about healing anymore. It was destruction, defense. I forced the rogue to its knees, my magic holding it in place, binding it to the ground as it struggled against the invisible force. Finn whimpered behind me, but I couldn't look back. Not yet. I had to keep it contained. Stay back, I shouted at Finn, my voice breaking as I fought to maintain control. Stay behind me. But Finn, always so brave, didn't listen. He shifted, small paws scrambling to his feet, his golden eyes wide with fear but unyielding. He moved forward, staying close, not understanding the danger. I could feel the rogue's movements becoming frantic beneath my control. It wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. The strain was too much, the silver poisoning, the bond. I couldn't hold the rogue down much longer. And then, from the chaos of the battle, a figure appeared. Kale. His golden eyes were blazing with fury as he charged toward us, his massive wolf form cutting through the pack of rogues like a force of nature. He didn't hesitate. He didn't slow down. He was with us in an instant. With one powerful strike, Kale tore through the rogue's throat, his massive jaws closing around its neck, silencing it instantly. The rogue's body fell limp, and the battle came to a brief halt. Silence settled for a heartbeat as Kale stood over the fallen enemy, his golden eyes flickering with a dangerous intensity. Then, Kale's gaze moved to me, and his expression softened ever so slightly. He was covered in blood, but his eyes only held concern for me, for Finn. Lara, he said, his voice low, barely above a whisper. Are you all right? I looked at him, my body trembling from the magic I had used, from the pain that was starting to creep back into my bones. But I couldn't stop the relief that surged through me when I saw him standing there, unscathed. I'm fine. Finn, I turned to see Finn standing there, his golden eyes wide but unharmed, his small form trembling with a mixture of fear and awe. He was safe. I had kept him safe, even if it had been by the skin of my teeth. Kale moved closer, his eyes never leaving Finn as he crouched down, his wolf form still powerful and imposing. He gently nudged Finn with his nose, letting the small pup climb onto his back without hesitation. Finn's giggle was soft, almost lost in the noise of the ongoing battle, but it was enough. The bond between us pulsed, and for a moment, everything felt right again. You're safe now, Kale said, his voice a mixture of relief and pride. He turned to me, his golden eyes locking with mine. We'll get through this. But the battle was far from over. I could feel the weight of the rogues' presence, their numbers still overwhelming. Even with Kale's strength, even with the power we had at our side, we weren't out of danger yet. Kale rose to his feet, still holding Finn in his massive form. He turned toward the battlefield, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. We need to finish this, Kale said firmly, his alpha presence unwavering. Now, I nodded, taking a step back as Kale moved forward, his muscles rippling with each stride. The pack was still fighting, still holding their ground, but I knew that the final push was coming. The rogues had no idea what they were up against. I couldn't just stand by. I wasn't going to watch Kale and the pack fight alone. The bond that tied me to them, to Finn, was too strong. I had to do my part. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes and gathered the last of my strength. The magic flowed through me, an unstoppable current of power, ready to strike. I was no longer just a healer. I was the protector of this family, of this pack. I raised my hands, and the world seemed to freeze. The air around me crackled with energy, the power of the soul-weaving magic surging through my veins. I could feel the connection between Finn, Kale, and me pulsing like a living thing. It was a force I had never fully understood, but in this moment, I could feel its potential, its might. This wasn't just magic. This was my bond with them. This was everything I had fought for. The rogues were closing in, their ferocity only matched by the pack's unwavering defense. But the battle had reached its breaking point. We needed to end it now, before anyone else was lost. I raised my hands to the sky, closing my eyes, focusing. The storm that had been brewing within me, a storm of power, desperation, and love, rumbled to life. The magic responded to my command, a massive wave of energy that swept through the battlefield like a tidal wave, knocking the rogue wolves back. The pack roared in unison, the sound of their collective strength, and while pushing against the force of the enemy. I could feel the rogues faltering, their resolve crumbling as the power of the bond between Kale, Finn, and me ignited the battlefield. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for family. I felt Kale's golden eyes on me, felt his determination flood through the bond as he surged forward. "Together," he called out, his voice reverberating with the raw power of the Alpha. "For the pack. For us." With that, the tide shifted. Kale's presence on the battlefield was a force of nature. He tore through the remaining rogues with a fury that sent them scattering, each strike echoing with the power of his Alpha command. The pack fought harder, their movements synchronized, as if the bond between us fueled their strength. We weren't just fighting for territory. We were fighting for each other. The rogue leader's body lay in a heap at the center of the courtyard, his reign of terror finally over. But there were still others, still more of the rogue pack to fight. I couldn't stop. I couldn't rest. I was one with this fight, one with the pack. The bond was no longer just a tool. It was my lifeline, my strength. With a roar of fury, I pushed forward, the magic flowing through me like fire. A shockwave of power erupted from me again, sending a dozen rogues sprawling across the courtyard. The pack rallied behind me, their energy fueling my own as we fought back the remaining invaders. But amidst the battle, I saw something that made my heart skip. Finn. He was standing by Kale's side, his small form so brave, his golden eyes filled with trust. He was no longer the terrified child he had been when I first found him. He was a fighter now, not with weapons, but with his spirit, with the bond that connected us all. Kale saw him too. His golden eyes softened, and for just a moment he paused, his gaze meeting mine across the battlefield. The world seemed to stand still as our bond pulsed with unspoken understanding. "You've made him strong." Kale's voice reached me through the bond. "And you've made me strong too." I wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that this was never just about power. It was about love, about connection. But words weren't needed. Not now. Not in this moment. We had all sacrificed. We had all given something of ourselves to this fight. And now it was finally over. The last of the rogues were retreating, their will broken, their numbers shattered. The battle was won. But the cost had been high. I stood there, my body trembling with exhaustion, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. The pack was victorious, but the battlefield was littered with the bodies of the fallen. Wolves from both sides, their lives cut short by the violence that had torn through their lives. Kale shifted back into his human form, bloodied but unbowed. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in them, something raw, something that had been building between us from the very beginning. He walked toward me, his movements slow, deliberate. When he reached me, his arms wrapped around me, pulling me into his embrace. The bond between us surged, and I felt his strength, his fear, his relief flooding through me. "You did it," he whispered against my hair. "You saved us." I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into him, letting the weight of the battle, the weight of everything that had happened, finally settle. "We saved each other," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Finn joined us then, his small body curling into my arms, his golden eyes still wide but no longer filled with fear. "Mama," he said softly, his voice filled with something new. "We won." I smiled, my heart swelling with love for him. "Yes, little wolf. We won." For the first time since I had arrived in the stronghold, I felt like I was truly home. The battle was over, but our fight, our journey, was just beginning. The bond between Kale, Finn, and me had been tested, forged in the fire of battle and bloodshed. But it was unbreakable, and no matter what came next, we would face it together.